Hello, welcome to the official first devlog in my series on the Titania project, which is my first ever attempt at creating anything that resembles a game, aside from, I guess, Minecraft maps and stuff like that. The first episode, I guess the devlog 0, was more about the concept, more about kind of the reason I want to do this, talking about the project as an idea and what it could be and the concepts behind it. But now I'm actually starting to work on the prototype. What's going to happen is I'm going to make a prototype version of the game that demonstrates the basic, like very basic mechanics of the game, one of which is pretty complicated, as you'll see. And then I'm going to I might make a second version of the prototype. It's going to be an iterative process when it comes to the prototype stage of, I want my friends to play this and sort of test it out, break it, all that type of stuff, see what's fun and what's not fun. And then after that, when I fully know what the game should be, then I can make maybe a demo of sorts or start on the actual game. What I'm making, what I'm reaching for as a game seems quite out there, especially for me. This is my first Unity project, and I feel like my idea is pretty ambitious, but I need to try. I need to try to do this, and I'm actually, the little progress I have made so far, the amount of things the small little details I've had to learn, the amount of small hurdles and error messages I've had to go through just to get what I have now, even though it's not a crazy amount of stuff, I'm still very proud of it, and I'm really excited to show you what I have done so far. So the first thing I did was sort of think about the concept of the game a little bit more. The prototype is definitely a place that can be kind of dynamic. It doesn't, the idea for this game isn't a static thing. It can change and evolve, and that's exactly what I did at first. There was something not really clicking about the most original mechanic in the game, the sort of warping and different versions of yourself that I talked about in the last devlog, which I would go watch that because it gives a lot of context of the sort of concept of this game is going to get more and more polished, more and more focused, and more interesting, I think. And if you go back to devlog 0 and you come back here, you're going to see an improvement in the concept and the focused nature of this game. There's still way more to go, but the idea I present is a lot better than what I presented in devlog 0. So this is a few days after my last recording. I'm sort of getting in the groove of making sure I record stuff, but I'm still very early in this process. But I think this recording is very, very important actually, because I have sort of started to rethink the mechanics of this game for the better, I think. So here's something I wrote earlier. An issue with treating the time warp mechanic too much like a tool for puzzle solving is that the player will have to wait many minutes to do what they know they have to do. It being on a timer wastes the player's time. Either this mechanic is used for a different purpose beyond simple puzzles, or the player can control time warp itself, but there is a cost for it. So the natural way to make the mechanics of this game more cohesive is probably just to ignore those two options and actually just scrap the warping idea as a whole and just focus on the most original mechanic, the one that people sort of commented on in the last video. That seems probably the most interesting part of this game. I don't think the time warp thing is it's not super original. It's been in multiple games so far, and I don't think it's going to be a selling point for the game. I don't think it's going to be widely interesting. And since this is an indie game, this is my first game, I need to focus on the very specific mechanics. So what is this mechanic that I need to focus on? I need to focus on the most original mechanic. That would be the timeline versions of the player. The timeline versions of the players when you can see yourself after you travel back in time to the past. Unfortunately, something I kind of came across when thinking about this is that taking away the time warp, even though it is necessary, might make this game too much like Outer Wilds. You know, the overall selling point could be similar. Both are an immersive, smaller open world game where you are looping time attempting to solve the reason for the world's eventual destruction. I want this game to have at least one original mechanic that sets it apart from other games. Outer Wilds inspires me, but I hope I don't ride the innovation of that game too heavily. The core selling mechanic, the core original mechanic of this game is that whenever you want to go back in time in order to survive or continuing uncovering the mystery, you are met with what would logically occur, a version of you already existing at that point. Fortunately, you know, story, setting, art style will set it apart from Outer Wilds to some extent as well. But I'm hoping that this mechanic here, even though it is sort of a time loop game now, I hope that it can sort of differentiate it from Outer Wilds. And I think I'm correct, because while coming up with the puzzle room for the prototype, which is like my next thing I need to do, I realized that this idea generates an entirely different puzzle structure, and it inadvertently, you know, forces me to add in a mechanic I think is pretty interesting, while at the same time pretty freaking complicated. Alright, so I want to explain the sort of time looping of this game because it is a little complicated, unfortunately. So I kind of want to explain it because I think a visual will really get the idea across, because it took me a while to sort of realize that there are going to be a lot of issues when it comes to basically think about a game, like think about a movie where there's time travel and stuff. In a movie, time travel is way easier than in a video game, because in a movie, you're writing what the characters need to do. If time needs to work out perfectly for continuity to just, you know, work, then you can do that in a movie because you can tell the characters exactly what to do. Basically, you can tell your characters to fulfill like a time prophecy, basically. In a video game, you can't do that. You can't tell the player exactly what to do. Now, sometimes you can. If you know there's an obstacle or something that they have to go through at some point, then you know that they will. You can use that to put things in the past as a reference to something you're going to do in the future, but not everything can be like that, especially in this game where not everything you do is entirely necessary or will be forced upon you. There might be a few of these that will be throughout the map, but not everything. Let's imagine there are these sort of teleporters. This is where you first spawn in the game. Like, this is where you spawn on your first loop of ever playing the game. That's where you're at. And oh, by the way, I'm using the Prey freaking spaceship or space station as a reference. The map's gonna look nothing like this, but I just thought it was cool. Anyways, so let's imagine this is you on your first loop, and this is like your path. So you like go up here, you kind of go around the ship, kind of exploring, and let's imagine there's gonna be doors along the way, of course, but let's imagine there's this door, it's kind of important door, that you have to unlock with a puzzle of some sort. Like, you literally have to do a puzzle. It's gonna take some time before this door is open. It's not open when you get there, it is locked when you get there. And let's imagine there's other doors, like let's say like here you kind of branch off to explore some hallway or something, and let's say you open up a door over here, but it's not a puzzle, it's just a normal door. It's just like you push A to open or you push enter to open. It's not anything crazy. But then you go up here and you're like, all right, I'm kind of ready to go into the past. And then there's a teleporter up here. At this point, this is not exactly how your playthrough would go, obviously, like not at all. But this is an idea of like, imagine there are these teleporters. There's one here, and there's going to be more throughout the actual map in my game. There will be 3 teleporters in the prototype that I'm working on, at least the plan or the puzzle I'm working on. Well, they're kind of phasing through her legs. At least this game has legs, mine doesn't have legs. I really love this game because, like, this doesn't look... Like, the graphics on this, if you look really close, aren't like, whoa, look at that. That's amazing. But from far away, it doesn't matter. It's all about the illusion. It's all about how it looks from far away. It can look realistic without having to look realistic up close. I think that's kind of the idea. But the texture work is really what sells this game, I think. And of course the lighting. So there's 2 teleporters here. Now I'm going to use red because this is loop 1. This is your path in loop 1. You came through, you opened this door by doing a puzzle. It took you some time. You came in here, you opened a door over here, you know, whatever. Let's say this hallway over here was kind of dark, but you turned on the lights over here or something. Imagine you're going through the ship and you're making small changes. Some of them are way more of a consequence to others. Like this door, for instance, this is the biggest change you probably ever made on this loop, is opening that door. So imagine you use this teleporter up here, this time warping machine, to teleport you back to the point where you exist in the past, but you're down here. When you teleport to the past, you're now up here. Your loop 1 version of yourself is down here, and they're just starting. They just got out of the teleporter, and now they're slowly walking, slowly going through this path, right? Now, we need to make sure that this loop 1 path is as similar as possible to what it is here. Because if your loop 2 version of yourself, you playing the game, since you have free will, you can do whatever you want. But if you basically interrupt yourself, if you interrupt your loop 1 version of yourself, and you do something that would like fundamentally alter their path, it's sort of questioning whether you would exist in the first place. Like, if you interrupted yourself in loop 1, would you ever have teleported in the first place? And then you would cease to exist in the future, or in this loop 2 version of yourself. So here's what I'm going to say. Like, you go down this hallway. Let's say you turn on these lights. Now, mind you, you haven't turned on these lights yet. In loop 1, you're turning on the lights. That's the last sort of change you make, is you turn on the lights over here. Your loop 2 version of yourself just turned on the lights for you. And that's kind of interesting to think about, because what if your future, or, you know, your loop 1 version of yourself gets here and they're like, the lights are already on, so they're not going to do anything with it. But it's also kind of a small thing, you know, it's not something huge. Say you come through here, you come through here, you go to this door. Yeah, let's say you open that door. Now this door is insanely important. This door is super duper important. This door is something that your loop 2 self, like, this is a point. How do I explain this? You shouldn't touch this. Your loop 2 version of yourself should not touch this door, because your loop 1, that is the biggest change you're going to make in loop 1, is that eventually you're going to open this door. If you open this door for yourself, it is going to be really weird. Because in the puzzle I'm making, I'm not sure if it's exactly applicable to this one, but whenever you can sort of, your future version of yourself can influence the past in this way, or at least, not necessarily the past, but like the loop 1 version of yourself, if you can influence in this way, it causes these weird issues that basically break the puzzle. In general, it would be weird that you could open this door here, and your past self would just walk through the door and never have to have done the puzzle in the first place. It's a little weird. Now here, it's not super big of like a consequence of like, your past self, it doesn't matter. Like, as long as you did the puzzle, that's cool. But there's certain instances where your loop 2 self is the one. There's going to be a puzzle in the prototype where your loop like your loop 1 and loop 2 self have to work together to open a door, and then your loop 3 self walks through the door. Now imagine your loop 1, you know, there's like these buttons you have to push. Imagine loop 1 pushes the button, then time travels back in time, loop 2 pushes the button. What's stopping loop 2 from just walking through the door? Actually, what's stopping loop 1 from just walking through the door? Because loop 1, they're gonna assume, well, I'm gonna go into the future and I'm gonna go into the past and I'm gonna open the door anyways. Like, I know I'm gonna do this, so the door should be open right now. Now, if this was a movie, that would make total sense. But this is not a movie. We don't know what the player is going to do. We have no idea if they actually are going to go into the past and open the door for themselves. We don't know that because they can do whatever they want. They can just sit there and not do it. They can quit the game. So we can't open that door for them. We can't assume that the door will be opened eventually. I've been playing this game a lot recently. Basically, I did that live stream on I think it was the Summer Games Fest, and I really wasn't interested in anything there, too much. Oh, a shotgun. What? I have no idea how long this game is, by the way. So watching the Summer Games Fest on stream, I wasn't really interested in anything particularly, except this one game called Routine, that I really think I should... Do I have a keycard? I do. That I really think I should talk about eventually, because I really like the aesthetic of the game, and it's very... I made a joke during the thing that, oh, this is another one of those games where there's no HUD in the trailer, but when you actually play the game, there'll be this huge HUD in the way, and it'll be annoying, and it'll just ruin the immersion. But actually, the game is quite mysterious. It was like announced many years ago and then sort of went silent like 2 times. There's an entire video someone did on it that I might link in the description. I don't know if this is actually going to go in the video. So your loop 1 version of yourself is like up here. He's probably at this door right now. He probably just opened it. Now here's the sort of mechanic that I want to make clear. Your loop 2 version of yourself, to avoid causing these time issues that basically would kind of break the game and make no sense, it would kind of ruin continuity. It would be very confusing. The mechanic I'm thinking of is sort of like this Geiger counter. Geiger counters are used to basically detect radioactivity, and that's what I want here, but the Geiger counter is detecting like time activity or something like that. It's detecting basically how unstable the timeline is right now. It's basically helping you make sure that you do not change the past in a way that will make you not exist in the present. So basically the idea, the mechanic of this game is that you need to protect this path at all cost, and that makes sense for the next loops too. Once you loop again, like you find a teleporter over here or something, once you loop again, you have to protect this path at all cost. So let me explain this as well. These lights here, the reason I put these lights and I put this door here is to explain a sort of sub version of this mechanic. This is like the major version. This is like insta-kill. This will just, you'll break space-time, it's over. But for smaller stuff like doors and lights, like, will your past self really notice that stuff? Will your past self really change their path that much just because 1 or 2 doors were open when they should have been closed? Not exactly. So basically, these won't insta-kill you, or they won't insta-break space-time, but they will fill up your meter. There will be a Geiger counter type of, like, meter, and maybe a sound effect as well to sort of show you what objects and stuff are unstable or might be unstable if you start to change them. And so basically, turning on the lights might fill up your meter a little bit. If you don't turn them back off, they'll stay filled up. You go to this door, it might fill it up. If you open it, it might fill it up even more. If you keep making small changes like this, if you keep opening doors and doing all these small little things, eventually your timeline will become so unstable that you will break space-time. Alright, so this is like, I think a day or two later since the last recording I did, but I designed this map, which I might go over in the final recording I'll do later, but I'm working on the Blender stuff. It's nowhere near done. Well, I mean, I did a lot so far. I finally just sucked it up and started doing all this stuff. Blender can be really tedious, like many things, but when you get near completion, it starts to get satisfying. But I just wanted to talk about, this doesn't even really have to do with the Blender stuff itself, but I'm just sort of looking above. Like if I look above, when you're really looking at this diagram, I don't want to spoil what the puzzles will be yet, because I basically, like, I don't want to spoil it. I might, because either I don't want to spoil it at all, or in the final recording I will like have a more satisfying way of saying it. But the solution to this puzzle is something I know what the like fundamental, or like the basic solution is. I know exactly what you have to do. Um, but I don't know, like, specifically when it comes to movement. Now I have these vents here, and these vents and stuff, other than this one, which is how you get to this teleporter room, but these vents, like, are necessary, because if you didn't have the vents, like, it would be really hard to get past yourself. This puzzle is going to involve 3 versions of yourself. You playing as one of them, of course. And so I think it'll be really interesting. Like, I'm thinking about how this puzzle would work, and there's so many different factors. And like, there's like puzzles within puzzles here in this very simple room, and I'm kind of proud that I've come up with it, but obviously I have to do the work of like actually getting it into a working state, actually making the puzzle functional. But the way I'm thinking about it now is like, I don't even know how exactly I would go about moving throughout this map without seeing myself yet. And I think that's really interesting to me, because I think I might get to a point where I'm testing out the map and it might not work, like where it's way too hard. And I think that's fine, because then I could go in and add different stuff. Like, I had an idea of like, there'll be a power room over here and you could turn off power to things, kind of like Alien Isolation. It's kind of an unoriginal puzzle, but this is a prototype. So you could like probably turn off the lights in some of these areas, and if you think about it, if you turn off the lights, then you won't be able to see, and if you can't see, then you can't see yourself. And so that would be like, if someone's getting stuck in like this hallway, for instance, or like I just cannot do all these puzzles and get past myself at the same time without seeing my past version, or my past version of myself seeing me. I just can't do it. So basically, that would be the solution. It's like, oh, here's the solution. I think that's like, honestly, really like, I think this is so cool. I'm very excited to like get this working, because if I can get this working, the amount of different, I'm hoping that when people play this, I want my friends to play this and stuff, if I can like get it optimized. But it would be so cool to see like how many different ways you could actually solve the puzzle. There's one way to solve the puzzle, like, technically, but I want to see the ways in which they solve the miniature puzzles within it. Mainly like how they're going to avoid their past self, because I find that really interesting. And then expanding that out to an entire game is just like, there's so much cool stuff you could do. So I came up with this puzzle idea that I don't want to go into too much detail with yet because I feel like it'll be more relevant in later devlogs when I'm, actually developing the puzzle itself. But the main thing I wanted to focus on was the level, like not any of the mechanical stuff like, pushing buttons and, things actually working in the map, but just being able to move around the map, traverse the like vents and go under desk and stuff, the basic movement mechanics, as well as some doors to sort of you know bring the level to life, I guess. Basically get a foundation to start from where I have a level I can move in. Now I need to add in the puzzle elements. That was my end goal with this devlog, I guess. Which I started in Blender. I developed a lot of the models, or pretty much all of the models in Blender, and I imported them into Unity. Had a few issues there, but eventually I got it in. Alright, so past few days I've been just working on Blender stuff, getting the level created. I'm pretty happy with the level. I'm happy with all the little objects I put in there. I'm going for a very minimalist sort of style with this prototype. That's not what the game's gonna actually look like, obviously. The game will be way more realistic, I guess. Depending on like what I can do, because I'm just one person. So the art style might be a little like minimalist, but not this much. This is like gray box, like template stuff. I didn't spend an insane amount of time on each of the assets. They're very much the basic bare minimum of what you want with these types of assets and stuff like that. So I think the level looks nice, but it's a temporary level. It's not meant. The art isn't important yet. It's all about the mechanics, and I'm very excited about the movement. I'm actually very proud of myself for the design of this particular area. I think it's actually really interesting, and I can't wait, like I said earlier, to figure out like what is the solution movement wise to this puzzle, and I can't wait to do that. There's still a lot of stuff to do, like got to figure out the lighting. I just added in like basically where there's not going to be any ambient shadow. Like if there's a shadow, it's going to be pitch black because I kind of want it to be, I want the game to have a lot of horror vibes. It's not necessarily a horror game, but I want it to have a lot of horror vibes where it's like I want the game to be sort of uncomfortable, I guess. Especially in this puzzle, the idea of yourself being in the puzzle isn't by itself like scary, especially since you're just a capsule, like you're a red capsule, like who cares? But I think I can make it scary, especially in the later game with the, the art stuff. But here, having it be really dark and stuff like that, having that dark atmosphere, I think could make this scary because you're going to be looking around the corner every time of like, oh crap, I really hope my past version of myself isn't here, which is reminds me of horror game. Like I've been playing Alien Isolation a lot recently. It's so freaking good. Elden Ring is just sort of missing. It feels a little too quantity over quality. I think that's the issue with it. That's something I kind of want to do the opposite with my game, where I don't want it to be too long. I want it to really focus on areas. Something I really like about this game is that some people say, some people might say it's too long, but I think the reason it feels so long is because you're spending so much time in certain levels, and sometimes it's a little annoying how much they make you backtrack, but in certain locations, I think I really enjoy it, especially the medical. I think the medical area, just that whole section of the game, is probably my favorite so far. I want to have a similar vibe with my game where a lot of the game is going to take place in similar locations, but the thing about it would be that those locations are so detailed, they're so rich in storytelling and great level design and secrets and stuff. You really don't mind walking through them again. You don't mind sort of discovering new ways to get around them. I wanted to be an immersive sim in that way. And I think the reason it's so long isn't because they design a billion different rooms or something. It's simply because it takes you so long to actually get through the levels. And that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing, actually. Of like, it really wants you to take your time to like really appreciate these levels. Whereas if this was a shooter, you would walk through a hallway in Alien Isolation and then just forget about it. But in the way that the game actually works, you're going to be walking through that hallway multiple times because you got to be careful if there's an alien about to kill you. I got the movement to a point where I liked it, but now that I go into this level, I actually found a bug. I don't know how I found this bug, but I found another bug with crouching and stuff, so I got to figure out that bug. Also, there's a vent that you just there's inclines in the vents in one of them, and you just can't go up it because the friction is too high. So I gotta figure that out, but also you get stuck on objects, which is really annoying because this is a very tight level. So if you're just constantly getting stuck on stuff, especially if you're trying to like move quickly, it's gonna be annoying. So I have to figure out how to I gotta fix the movement. Even though this isn't the final movement, I intend for people to play this. I intend for it to like sort of it needs to accurately portray what the game is basically about. And if the movement isn't, it doesn't need to be perfect, but it needs to be enough to like satisfy me, I guess, to like actually show this. I don't want it to get in the way of what this prototype can show. Now, once I got to Unity, I think I've learned a lot about development and coding and stuff through Unity. I probably developed the character controller like 3 different times. I think I tried to do different versions of the doors as well. What I was sort of hoping for is not like an extremely polished experience. Like, if I wanted to make this isn't the final version of the game. This isn't like the final movement mechanics, but it needs to be the basic movement mechanics, and I want it to be polished as much as it needs to be to sort of facilitate that. I need a polished base here. And I know that I'm getting caught up on stuff in a prototype. Like, obviously, the movement and stuff doesn't have to be perfect. Obviously, I don't have to fix every single bug that happens. But in this devlog 1, I want to make sure that the foundation of this prototype is fully functional. It's going to fully work and it's not going to cause me problems later. I especially needed to optimize the code, make sure that my code is not super long. The first character controller I made, the code was about 300 lines long, which is just a huge no-no, especially for this puzzle. Later, it makes a little bit of sense. Now, I kind of went back and forth. At some point, I kind of took a break from the character controller and stuff like that, and I wanted to sort of focus on optimizing the game as well as adding in some different post-process effects. I added in stuff like motion blur. I added grain, give it that like Alien Isolation Arkham Knight type of feeling. I gave it some ambient occlusion as well as some color grading. I added some like warping to the screen, vignette over the screen, stuff like that. I added a few different things and I toggled with it a lot just to make it right, and I think it looks really interesting. There's multiple points where I had to go back in Blender and remodel things and rethink things. The materials especially, I had to basically, they imported into Unity, but I couldn't exactly edit them. At least I didn't know how exactly, so I had to create new versions of them, figure out how to apply it to the entire scene. I don't want to have to make this game extra realistic. This is my first game. I don't have the time or, the power to really create a game that's going to be insane looking. I have to find shortcuts and sort of illusions to make the game look more realistic than it actually is. Alright, so earlier I was pretty frustrated because a lot of the game wasn't running smoothly, and part of that is my computer. Like, I don't know if I'm gonna put that in, but I was like, man, I need to figure this out because it's frustrating me so much. So I decided I'm just gonna go ahead and start, writing the character controller. It's no longer a rigid body, but I watched a tutorial on doing a character controller, like very basic. I haven't implemented crouching or crawling, if that's going to be a thing yet. I'm not going to have it jumping anymore because I've realized jumping, not only does it make the code much more complicated, but it also just, it doesn't really fit the game. Like, I don't really know why you'd be jumping around. So, like, it's on a platformer. So there's no reason for you to be jumping, at least at this point in the project. There's not really a reason for you to jump around. So I'm getting rid of that. But I started writing it and I added in, like, basically you are a character controller, but basically the shell of you, I guess. There's this rigid body capsule object. So it's like I combine the rigid body with the character controller that's built into Unity. This character controller can walk up steps, it can walk up ramps and stuff much easier, like way easier than a rigid body can. It doesn't get stuck on walls, which is great for this particular prototype because it's very tight. You're going to be walking around shelves and stuff a lot, walking through vents. You cannot be getting stuck on walls and stuff. So that's way better. So then I was like messing around with physics. I got the physics to work, but it was very jittery, like way more jittery than the rigid body even was, which was a little odd to me. I didn't really get it. Looked at some stuff, heard that interpolation would smooth it out. Didn't really work. I was messing with like the mass of the objects, really just trying to figure it out until I realized, okay, I started looking at this long document about how to make Unity games smooth. And apparently, I didn't want to. So, the tutorial I watched, which I'll probably link in the description, it didn't use fixed update. It used update, and they used time.delta time, which is useful, but it's hard to keep track of. And that's why it's much better to use fixed update. And the document I read basically said do as much as you can in fixed update. Everything that needs to run smooth, put it in fixed update. Because even if fixed update might cause some issues later, like it's gonna be better. So whenever I put everything in fixed update and I adjusted all my values because I started running super fast, it started running smoother. Like the whole game did. And I'm just very, this makes me hopeful because like an hour to like 2 hours ago, I was like, bro, what the hell? Like I'm gonna have to rewrite all this stuff. But now I think this is much better and it's gonna run much smoother. So I'm gonna start writing in the crouching and the crawling, and I'm gonna make sure that this is as simple as possible because the other character controller I made was like 300 lines long, which is like, no, that's the reason the game was lagging so much, is because I made my character controller way too complicated. And there's gotta be better ways of coding the same thing I did. I probably did it way too overcomplicated. So that's my next goal. My goal is to make sure that freaking the doors work. I can walk around, I just want the movement to work, and then that's this devlog. So I just want to make sure all that stuff can work. Now, the one thing I wanted to really get right with the code is not to, like, I wanted the most simple solutions to things as possible. At least, I kept getting simpler and simpler the more I redid my scripts, and I'm really satisfied. I only have 2 scripts right now in the game, and the 2 scripts are for the character controller and the doors. And the doors, at first, I was like, didn't know what I was gonna do. I didn't know how the animation worked in the engine, and I was trying to basically literally animate it in the code in the script itself, which is like really dumb on my part. I had no idea. I didn't really know how to do animation yet. I didn't even know if you could do it in Unity. I had no idea. This is where I'm at. Like, I don't actually know what I'm doing. But eventually I did find the animator, and not only that, but I wanted to make sure that I could have one script and one animator per door. I didn't want to have a script for every single door. And that's really what I need to focus on. I feel like that's what game development is about, at least the coding side, is trying to find very simple solutions to these different problems, trying to make sure that you limit the amount of code you have as much as possible and you make everything simple in one place. And that's what I actually did with the doors. And I'm actually very impressed that I could get all of the doors in one script. I love the animator. So in the animator itself, there's like these different arrows, and you can tell, like, basically you can tell the code which animation to do next, like if they're allowed to. Basically, I have this is ceiling boolean, which is like a true or false thing. And basically you can input, like you can do input up, which is spacebar. And if is ceiling is true, it just won't allow you to go to the next animation, which is very cool. And I did that not even in the script, but in the animator itself, which I think is really cool. It also allows you to basically avoid different scripting things, like the doors, for example. The doors, there's only like 4 animations for them. 2 of them are idle animations where they're just staying still. And basically, the way that I have the arrows set up is that the door cannot close if it's in the open position, if that makes any sense. This basically allows me to not have to code in the fact that, like, say the door closed when it was already closed. If it's in the closed idle animation where it's already closed, and then imagine it just cuts to the closing animation. That's gonna make the door look like it teleported back up and then it's closing again. Now, with these arrows, I can basically say that there's no way, like, there's not an arrow from the closed idle to the closed door animation, meaning that it will never be able to even do that. It can only close if it's at the open idle animation, which I find that really interesting and like a huge time saver, because in the code before, I was like really trying to figure out how to simplify all these different Boolean variables, and it's quite annoying. So yeah, a lot of this, even in the animator and stuff, I had to learn a ton. I had to learn different errors. Stuff would come on to the error bar, or something wouldn't be working, and I'd have literally no idea, like, what was not working. Sometimes they were like actual bugs with the engine, but very, very often they were actual issues I did that I just had no idea I actually did. And I had to go in and find them. I've gone on different subreddits and stuff multiple times. I've had to look up different things and look at people's answers on those forum websites to see what the heck was going on, because that happens so much. The animator did save my life, but like at the same time, there was so many different bugs and stuff I had to figure out to sort of make the transition smooth. There's just a ton of stuff I kind of learned from doing this type of coding, and I know for anybody that's an actual game developer or has seen other devlogs, I'm not very far in. You know, this is the first devlog, but you know, this is my bar. My bar is quite low, but I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot of stuff so far just doing this very basic stuff. I've learned a lot, and I'm pretty satisfied with some of the progress I have. Is this like an insane amount of progress? No. But this is like the basis of the prototype. I have really done a lot of the hard work so far of getting the basics down, learning stuff like the animator, learning post processing, learning the lighting probes and reflection probes and all that stuff. Just tons of small stuff you wouldn't ever think of. If I showed you just the basic raw gameplay without any of my commentary, you would have just not, you would have no idea how much actual learning and work actually went into making that, the amount of reiteration of the code went into doing that. If I were a professional, I could probably make this in a day. But as myself, trying to learn Unity, it took me a while, but I'm very proud that I got here. And I hope you guys are too. And I want to know what you guys think of this stuff so far. Here is my progress. Here's a raw clip of the very boring walking gameplay, but it demonstrates everything that I've done so far, and I hope you guys are looking forward to what I can do with this very basic stuff in the future.